Hey guys, welcome back to the Jays Fit Down podcast. I'm your host Jaden, and today we're going to be doing a winners slash losers recap of the NFL draft last night. And I'm not going to go through every single pick, but just highlighting a lot of picks that stood out to me and some of the picks that didn't quite make some sense. So we're talking about that here on today's episode. But make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Check us out here on Jays Fit Down. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. So make sure you follow us there and follow us on Instagram, Jays Fit Down Pod, and TikTok on Jays Fit Down Pod as well. So NFL draft, much awaited this is probably one of the more anticipated drafts we've had in a while. I feel like, well, at least, from the standpoint of the top couple of prospects that a lot of people were keeping their eyes on, those being Shedeur Sanders, of course, and Travis Hunter and Cam Ward, right? And Shedeur didn't even go in the first round. So we'll get to that in a little bit as well. And I'll talk about why I believe that is. But overall, this went about how I expected it to. I think we all knew that the Titans were going to pick Cam Ward at number one, and overall, I grade that as a B grade. That was a good move. They needed a quarterback. Obviously, we knew that. It was just a question of, was it going to be, Shedeur Sanders? Was it going to be Cam Ward? Who was going to be that between the two of them? Who was going to be the number one pick? And most teams, I feel like, end up believing that Cam Ward was a better option between the two, and personally, I think they're right. I don't believe that Shedeur Sanders is as good as a prospect as a lot of people think he is. He great quarterback at Colorado. He is a great quarterback. Not discrediting anything from him. I'm not going to get into the whole confidence thing and how I'm not going he's a very confident young man. He's got an aura to him that's good, and a lot of people don't really like that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that as a football player specifically, there are things that he's still that don't warrant a number one overall pick or maybe a top five pick in general anyway, to me personally. And that is why he was not selected at number one and that Cam Ward was. And Cam Ward, you see on the tape, he's got the arm, he's got the elusiveness in the pocket. He can move around, he can make those crazy throws, kind of like those Patrick Mahomes-esque type throws. And again, Tennessee needed a guy right now. Like they need, they're on a trajectory right now where Will Levis did not work out for them, Malik Willis did not work out for them. They had to get a quarterback, and Cam Ward made the most sense. So they went and got him, and I think overall it was a good pick for Tennessee. Smart move on their part to draft him right there. Then you had the Jags who traded up with Cleveland. Cleveland had the second overall pick. Interestingly, I thought the Browns were probably going to take Travis Hunter. I guess they didn't view him. I guess they just didn't want to take him. But the Jags traded up where they had a really good offer that Cleveland could not pass up, and Cleveland was already trying to trade out of that pick anyway. And they went. The Jags selected Travis Hunter with the second overall pick. So. Travis is a freak athlete, man. He's an amazing player, very talented. I had the pleasure to watch him when he was in high school here in Georgia. He played at Collins Hill, and he's just one of those guys. Like he's going to go out there and he's just going to do things that'll make you go like, "What in the world just happened?" Because he's just that freak of an athlete. He is an amazing, talented football player. However, the whole talk about him being wide receiver, cornerback, it's like, okay, I personally think he's better. I don't know, man. Like, I honestly think he's better as a wide receiver than he is as a cornerback. Personally, I think he's a really good receiver. I think that's where he'll most likely be playing in the NFL. Liam Cohen, who's head coach of Jacksonville, said they were going to try to get him on both sides of the ball, which maybe in certain packages, like if they decide to put him on defense, it's like, okay, yeah, you put him at corner, and then maybe certain offensive packages, you have him come in, run a jet sweep, or certain plays, whatever, like however they want to orchestrate that. But I personally believe he's better on the offensive side of football. I think he's a fantastic receiver, and I believe like that's where he'll be a majority of the time down there in Jacksonville. But it was a good pick. Trevor Lawrence gets a guy out there, who they can pair up with Brian Thomas Jr., who had an amazing season last year, amazing rookie season last year for Jacksonville. I think he's only going to take a step up further next year. And then you add a guy like Travis Hunter, possibly put next to him out there is going to be a deadly duo out there at the receiver position for Jacksonville. So great pick. I get that one an A+. I mean, you trade up. I mean, that guy, if you trade up in the draft like that, that prospect that you're trying to get has got to be worth it. And you don't pass up on a guy like Travis Hunter, with his, again, barrage of talent, right? So moving on to pick number 3, with the Giants taking Abdul Carter. Now, the Giants, man, I just don't, this is an organization that has just baffled me for a long time, and some of the decision making moves that they have had. I mean, most notably recently signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston to deals in the offseason to compete for the starting quarterback position. But that didn't quite make sense to me, because I'm like, this draft has a decent selection of quarterbacks. So it's like they could have. And I understand now, Abdul Carter is another one of those players. Is like, he's a freak pass rusher. He's an amazing, talented athlete. Like, you don't pass up on a guy like that if he's right there for you. I get that. And pass rush is what's going to help you win Super Bowls just as much as a quarterback can. You saw the Philadelphia Eagles get after Patrick Mahomes. And that defensive line was ferocious, inside, outside. So you got to have a pass rush to win in the NFL now, and I understand that. However, again, I also believe on the flip side that the Giants probably should have went with a quarterback. But then again, they wouldn't have made sense to them to do that, because they would, if they were planning, clearly they weren't planning on taking a quarterback this year in the draft. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson to contracts. So they believe that they believe that the quarterback class in next year's upcoming group is better than this year's, which I don't particularly agree with. But we'll see, right? It may be more of a wider pool, but we'll see how the talent plays out. And the Patriots taking Will Campbell at 4, was a good move. You got to get a guy to protect your franchise quarterback, and he's playing offensive tackle at LSU. You don't know how he's going to fit specifically at left tackle, but I think it's a good move for New England there. You already got your quarterback, so you already got you've made progress, and you've already made progress through that track. Now with the quarterback, you got your quarterback last year. Now it's about building the offensive line, building those other positions of need, outside. I believe the Patriots should also continue to go maybe get you another receiver later on in the draft as well. This is a good receiver class, I believe. So something else to keep an eye on. Again, the Browns traded from pick 2 to down to pick 5 with Jacksonville. So they went and took Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Not a bad pick, not a horrible pick. Not exactly it pops off either. He's a good player interior wise on defensive line. It's just, but there were better options. But I mean, they do solve that problem with the interior defensive line help, right? Getting him there. And moving on to the Raiders taking Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State, one of the highly coveted running backs, in this whole draft, and a guy that everybody had been raving about. I mean, he is a freak. He is this dude. I mean, what he's able to do, how all those 200-yard rushing games he had in college at Boise State. I mean, he's a guy that's going to, tear through defenses. I wasn't expecting him to be picked this high. I thought he was probably going to go to Dallas or some other running back needy team there in that group, but Pete Carroll loves to run the football, judging back from Marshawn Lynch and beast mode days to even Chris Carson when they took him in the draft. He was a decent running back some years ago for the Seahawks. So now the Raiders going to get Ashton Jeanty. I think it's a good pick. It's not a horrible pick. I just hope they don't run him into the ground. And again, the quarterback position for the Raiders, you got Geno Smith, but I mean, I still, it'll be interesting to see what happens there, right? Moving on from that note, Jets taking Armand Membu from Missouri offensive tackle. They address a need there. Definitely need to fill that right tackle spot out, so I give that a B. And then the Panthers taking Ted McMillan. This was a really good pick to me. Carolina needed the receiver help for Bryce Young because that production lacked a little bit a good bit last year. So you need a guy to help that you could pair outside Xavier Legette at the wide receiver position. And I think Tech McMillan has got that. He's got that nice build, the physical body. He can go up and make those catches. The speed isn't completely there yet, but he's not really that type of receiver. He's one of those 50-50 guys, and he can stretch the field vertically. He's going to go up there, climb the ladder, get the football. Those are the type of guys, you need in the NFL just as much as your speed burners. And I think he's going to make a huge difference in Carolina, be a day one starter for that team. So, and then like some other picks that stood out to me. The Saints took Kelvin Banks, addressing that offensive tackle need after Ryan Ramczyk retired. So they need to get an offensive tackle from Kelvin Banks being that one from Texas. Bears taking Colston Loveland. Good pick right there. This is very smart. Why? Because, again, the offense for the Chicago Bears, just they needed more playmakers, to help Caleb Williams out. And then, with Ben Johnson being the head coach now, he's going to want to expand that offensive production. He lost Keenan Allen for agency, and so you got DJ Moore, you got Rome Odunze. Adding a guy like Colston Loveland to that receiving room will help open up that offense a little bit more, I think. So it was a smart move by the Chicago Bears front office, I think, to draft him there. The best tight end in this class by far. Tyler Warren's good too, but this guy's definitely the best tight end out of this entire draft class, right? 49ers taking Mykel Williams from Georgia. He's a guy, he had a good year in 2023, dipped off a little bit in 2024, still a solid pass rusher for them. The fact that he went over Jalen Walker is a little surprising to me. But, they believe that Mykel Williams was the better Georgia player. So, and Cowboys took Tyler Booker from Alabama, so addressing that offensive guard position, which they needed to. I thought they could have took receiver there. I was surprised that that they didn't try to get Matthew Golden, who played at Texas. So that would have made sense for Dallas there, but they maybe they'll address it later in the draft. And the Colts took Tyler Warren at the 14th pick from Penn State. He's the guy that can do everything, one of those gadget guys. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Kyle Juszczyk with the 49ers. He can run the football if you need to. Tyler Warren, he can catch the football. He can block. He can do whatever you want. Probably can play a little defense. He's one of those gadget guys. And I think he's going to fit well in Indianapolis with Shane Steichen and that offensive staff and how they want to run things there. And, we'll see who the starting quarterback's going to be for the Colts, week one, right? But Tyler Warren's a great pick. And then the Atlanta Falcons, my Atlanta Falcons finally picked a Georgia player in the NFL draft and took Jalen Walker with the 15th pick. Something I've been wanting them to do for a long time, finally getting some homegrown talent here from the state of Georgia. And you get Jalen Walker, this is a guy, he can be a game wrecker. He's very physical, good pass rusher. This is the team, the Falcons addressed the team need here, getting a guy like him at 15. Overall, I thought it was a good move. I thought that this is something that they definitely need to do. You go on offense in like the past 3 drafts, like in the first round, whatever, and so now that you have your offense built out with Drake London and Michael Penix, and Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson, you need to add to your defense. Your defense needs to be more physical, aggressive, ferocious. And you got a good secondary with J.C. Bates and A.J. Terrell. Get you another solid corner late in the draft, or through trade or free agency, whatever. But getting a guy like Jalen Walker, and they got James Pierce Jr. as well, which I'll talk about in a second, at pick 26, who they traded up to get. But this is a good move. I really like the move. I had Jalen Walker going to Atlanta. A lot of people thought that they wouldn't be bold enough to do it. I knew the Falcons would. They could not do it. You're at a position now in this draft, all these good edge rushers. You could not not take an edge rusher. There's no logical reason why they wouldn't have done it, and they went ahead and did it. So kudos to the Falcons there. Bucks taking wide receiver Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Good move, adding there to that receiving core with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And I think that was a smart draft move for Tampa Bay. Egbuka is one of those underrated receivers. He had a great career at Ohio State, and I'm glad to see that he is going to be able to make his mark in the NFL. Play on that national championship offense. So great to see him getting selected there. And then Matthew Golden went 23. I didn't think he was going to go this low. I mean, but I knew it was going to be. This is a highly defensive focused draft for the most part. It got good receivers in this draft class, but I didn't think that he specifically would go this low. Like I said, I thought the Cowboys were probably looking to taking him at pick 12, but the Packers take him, and they don't usually take first round receivers, so they really like, hey, this guy is the real deal. And Matthew Golden he arguably is the best receiver in this draft class. The dude can straight up fly down the field. His route running is very crisp. I like it. He in the playoffs played really good, and with Texas, and I think this is going to be a good move for Green Bay because their receiving room outside of Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, he's a little, he's on and off. He's injured and stuff. He was supposed to be that number one guy. Hasn't really been that guy for them yet. And now they get a guy like Matthew Golden who can potentially fall into that spot. So, and then, like I said, I also wanted to talk about the Falcons taking James Pierce Jr., trading up, those 2 first-round picks. So listen, I know that's like a lot of people are clowning them for that, and I get it, right? That's a risky move. But if you had a chance to get 2 really good edge rushers in the draft, like, you need to go do it. This is like the Falcons are in a spot right now where offensively they're set. Like I said, they are set, right? You got your offensive pieces. Now your defense is what you need to focus on, and the defensive line in particular. And that's why you go out and you get guys like James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker, because they can make a difference. Those are guys right there with the right coaching, with the right building. And with how Raheem Morris is a defensive center, and how the defensive line was performing late in the season for Atlanta last year, I think these guys could come in and make a real impact day one, and they have to. So that's kind of my overall draft assessment of round 1 so far. Like I said, I wasn't going to go through all of the picks, but like I said, generally speaking, these are the picks that kind of stood out to me. Some of them I didn't quite understand. And like I said, Shedeur Sanders is not going in the first round, guys. I mean, hey, look, it happens. I mean, you got quarterbacks. Look, Breeze ain't going in the first round. Brady ain't going in the first round, right? So, we don't know what's going to happen with him. We'll see, but that's just overall my general assessment, right? So make sure you guys follow us here or subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok, Jay's Fifth Down Pod. Find us right there for more clips and everything like that. And we'll see you next time on the show.